Yeah, fantastic to be here. It's been an awful long time since we've been back at Breaking Convention. It's fantastic that it's still going, and so good to see old friends make new ones. Yeah, very happy about this. So, as Amy said, this is going to be a bit of a call to action. I'm basically going to go over the campaign that I've been running in the UK to get psilocybin rescheduled, where we've got to, where we want to go, and ask for a little help from everybody here to make that happen. So I'm Timmy Davis. I'm the Psilocybin Rescheduling Project Manager at the CDPRG. The CDPRG is the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group. It was started by a Conservative MP named Crispin Blunt, who was originally Prisons Minister when he saw that within the high security prisons that he was in, drugs couldn't be kept out, and thought, well, in that case, how is it possible to keep drugs out of a country? He saw queues of heroin addicts queuing up for their methadone and thought, there's got to be something that we can do better for these people. So he put himself forward to be the co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group on drug policy reform. And we think that this is sort of indicative of something of a sea change, because he was the first Conservative MP to do so. But he did find that he didn't have many resources at his hands to sort of, do the research that he wanted to do, collect all the evidence and all that kind of thing. So he set us up. We're a think tank, we're a lobby group, and we do our best to act as a sort of middleman between civil society and government and parliament. We kind of metabolize the evidence collected and created by so many other fantastic people that have spoken today, for example, and Robin, of course, to put it in a digestible form for policymakers, give it to the right people at the right time so that change actually happens. There's a lot of inertia in this space. So Crispin is unremunerated. We've got a fantastic policy council that sit above us that help us inform exactly where we want to go with it all, to present evidence-based drug policy for public good, essentially. So it's worth mentioning that while we are the Conservative Drug Policy Reform Group, the Conservative in the title is more of a convention. It's to demarcate that and signify that we address a Conservative audience. We're not party affiliated. We're thinking about this in terms of there's a few years left of a Conservative government ahead of us. They're able to create the change that we need to see. And also, the centre-right are traditionally the most adverse to drug policy reform. So it's them who we need to address. So, of course, when you look at the drug policy landscape, it looks like my slides have gone a bit funny, but when you look at the drug policy landscape, you begin to see problems and opportunities, problems that I'm going to go into, including the Schedule 1 status of psilocybin and others, but also these big opportunities, both for patient access, but also in terms of economics. The psychedelic sector is set to grow to about $10 billion by 2027, and the UK, having produced the fantastic work that led to this psychedelic boom, should really be part of that. So, yeah, my slides have really done something. I think you'll get the idea. The psilocybin rescheduling project is made up of two separate pillars, the political and the public. Essentially, we're trying to lobby support from the public and from parliamentarians and people in government to apply the pressure to get the law changed and impact policy. We've got all sorts of collaborators, from the fantastic Breaking Convention to the equally fantastic Heroic Hearts and many others. So the central arguments of the psilocybin rescheduling project, which is what I'm managing at the moment, is essentially for the past 30 years, there have been no new pharmacological treatments to address depression other than esketamine. And this is a terrible situation that we find ourselves in, because so many people, both in the UK but worldwide, suffer from this terrible affliction that is the highest contributing factor to suicide and the largest cause of disability worldwide. again, as everybody in this audience probably knows, it's looking like psilocybin is going to be a revolutionary psychiatric intervention for depression and many other internalizing disorders. And so we find ourselves in a situation where this molecule that has all this potential is facing barriers to research. It's in Schedule 1 of the Misuse of Drugs Regulations 2001. It was placed there without an evidence base. It was a political decision, it was an emotional reaction, and now we're starting to see that that shouldn't be the case. So what we're trying to do is draw attention to that so that the government will move psilocybin to Schedule 2 or further by commissioning the ACMD so that research can happen and so we can achieve patient access as soon as possible. One of the first things that we did was research all of those things. We created this policy paper, The Medicinal Use of Psilocybin, which got all this press coverage, everywhere. It was in the Daily Mail, all sorts. And we did this with Professor Joe Neal of Drug Science at Manchester University, Dr. James Rucker of KCL, and a number of others, including Dave King, Breaking Convention's very own. And from there, we took that evidence and we presented it at an all-party parliamentary group meeting. It was a joint meeting between the APPG for drug policy reform and the APPG for mental health. So we've got a group of parliamentarians in the room and basically presented them all that evidence. James Rucker again spoke about mechanisms and potential. Professor Joe Neal spoke about the barriers, and we had a couple of people speak about their lived experience of healing through psychedelics. Michael Bourne on Psilodep1, Ainsley Course, who suffers from cluster headaches, and a veteran who chooses to remain anonymous, who treated his PTSD. We then took this evidence, you can see here in this picture that has worked out quite well, that Chris Bin and Jeff Smith, who are the co-chairs of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Drug Policy Reform, handing a stack of evidence to Kit Malthouse, who's the minister responsible for this particular area. So when he gets convinced, which we think he is or can be, he will basically commission the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs to review psilocybin's current scheduling and change it so that we can facilitate researcher and patient access. But he has spoken quite openly a number of times in a way that's, quite sort of narrow, doesn't really sense the sort of urgency of this rescheduling. Most recently, he said that I have commissioned the ACMD to look at barriers to research more broadly. This was on the 50th anniversary of the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971, where there was a business debate in the main chamber. So we do see this as an indication of success already, or at least moving there. There's been lots of interdepartmental communication on the issue. We think something's going to change. And this particular call for evidence, originally the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, put out this request for researchers into synthetic cannabinoids to respond saying how they, face these hurdles. And then through our pressuring and our lobbying and our campaigning, the ACMD has now put out a call for evidence for evidence of barriers to research beyond cannabinoids on other controlled drugs. So we, the CDPRG, submitted, as did many other people that are looking into psilocybin and other substances. So the first part of that report on synthetic cannabinoids was released a week or so ago, and we're yet to find out a release date of the second part. But we hope that before then, we'll see some change in this particular issue, at least. So that was the first wave of the project. We've made some ground, we've done some good work. But what I'm here to do is tell you about the second wave and what we would like you to do for us to help. One of the things that we've been working on, which I'm just going to zoom through, is with drug science. We're working to accelerate access to psilocybin by maximizing the possibility of NHS uptake. This means working with providers and CROs and things like that to facilitate as fast as possible this process towards market authorization. But this is the bit that I'm really here to talk about, the international campaign. And apologies, I did look for a picture of Dimeisters, but this was the best I could do to signify singing from the same hymn sheet. So essentially, we have in mind a sort of unification in purpose, that we want everybody within the psychedelic community, all these different organizations, to join in with us on. So first of all, you have the political pillar, which is quite simple. We're trying to influence policy at the UN level. So with some collaborators abroad, everywhere from Canada to Australia to Israel to South Africa, all over, we're trying to get people, well, we're going to go on a campaign to have this declaration on the right to universal access to all forms of safe and effective medicine recognized in the policy of the UN and various bodies that surround them. This is a kind of structure of what that's going to look like. We have a central international campaign team who will work together to deliver this declaration. And then you'll see these sort of surrounding satellites of all the different organizations within different regions. So, you know, on here, somewhere, you'd be able to plot Breaking Convention, for example. And this is where we're getting to, the public aspect, which is going to be extremely exciting, and is where you come in. So I want to ask you, do you support PAR? Do you support PAR for the dying? Now, most people are going to look at this hashtag and think, what on earth is PAR? I've never heard of that before. But there's rhyme to this. Essentially, we are collaborating with some fantastic people, including Tara Austin, who's in the crowd with us now, who works for Ogilvy. And Ogilvy are an ad firm, and she works in applied behavioral sciences within that firm. And Tara used to work on a campaign to do with what was at one point called cutting, at one point was called female circumcision, and later on came to be known as female genital mutilation, and now is able to be spoken about because of that sort of language that is much more palatable and unified. Everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody knows what they mean when they say FGM. So PAR, do you support PAR for the dying? Do you support PAR for the depressed? For researchers? For all of us? What is PAR? Psilocybin access rights. So we're hoping that today we can introduce you all to this particular string of words, a string of words that we hope will be spread all over by all of us as we move forward, not only in the UK, but globally, to achieve the right to access to psilocybin and other psychedelic substances, be they as medicines or otherwise. So how can you help? What I would like you all to do, I assume most of you have access to social media of some sort. So I would request that all of you now, hopefully, or later on, go onto your social media of choice and tweet or, you know, put an Instagram post, whatever it may be, on Facebook with the hashtag psilocybin access rights, with the hashtag PAR. I support PAR for the dying, for the depressed. I was at Breaking Convention today. I support psilocybin access rights. Please just begin to use this language everywhere you can, because before we know it, this is going to be everywhere. This is what everybody's going to be using. So the other thing that I would like you to do is go onto our website, cdprg.co.uk/psilocybin, and there's a template for a letter to write to your MP. And with that letter, we request that you do just that. Write to your MP. Tell them about psilocybin access rights. Tell them about the work of Crispin Blunt and the CDPRG. Tell them about Breaking Convention, Robin Carhart-Harris, everything that's going on here. And ask them to support psilocybin access rights, to support the psilocybin rescheduling project. And finally, subscribe to the campaign. Subscribe to our newsletter where you'll find out more as we release more and more globally around the topic of psilocybin access rights. As I mentioned, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, everything. And yeah, I hope to see your tweets later on. Thank you very much.